So, welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So, this is episode 86, which is a really great group chat that we just had with Ella Peinovich, who's the founder and CEO of Powered by People. So, Powered by People is a B2B wholesale marketplace connecting makers and brands with like-minded retailers. It's an earlier stage marketplace out of Kenya, but one that's rapidly growing and started to come up regularly in the world of marketplaces. So, this is a really great chat where we get to learn more about the founding story of Powered by People, how it's evolved and scaled as a B2B marketplace, and also had a great group Q&A for those on the chat. So really enjoy this conversation, and I know you're going to find it a great watch to the end. So Ella, welcome to the group chat. It's definitely great to have you join us here today. So I've been hearing a lot about Powered by People, so I'm really excited to learn more about it as a B2B marketplace today. Before we jump into things, so I think it'd be great if you can start off by sharing a little bit more on your background for those that don't know you.
Yeah, sure, of course. And thanks again, Mike, for having me. I'm excited to be a part of the community. I'm new, so be easy on me, and I look forward to getting a chance to meet everyone. But yeah, my background, prior to Powered by People, I actually launched my own ethical jewelry brand called Soko, which is shopsoko.com. And I launched that after moving to Nairobi after graduating from my master's at MIT. And I grew that business to over $5 million in annualized revenue, and we were selling into about 65 different countries globally into some of the best brands in North America, including Nordstrom's, Anthropologie, Goop, QVC even at one point. And yeah, it was at Soko that I built this really unique digital production tool that we used to effectively produce 50,000 units in a month, and that was used to then crowdsource production from our community of independent artisans across Kenya. We had a network of about 2,500. We called that our virtual factory, and ultimately allowed us to really scale up our operations in what was a very distributed workforce. And I think that was really the foundation then for a lot of the work that I do now at a platform level, supporting other independent brands to reach similar scales of market, access digital tools, and ultimately break down the barriers for access. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to jump in with that, but I guess first, how did you end up in Nairobi?
Great question. I was here actually. My thesis work at MIT was around distributed manufacturing, localized design, and distributed manufacturing, and looking at how do we avoid. I actually have an architecture degree of all things, and so a lot of what I did was about systems design and computer-aided design and manufacturing. So I've always believed in kind of this design and technology and using really design theory to sort of build out improved human systems, but with the benefit of hopefully using technology to lower the barrier of access for human involvement. Like I really do believe that it's about empowering people to have more access, or reducing barriers, or providing aggregation through technology that reduces costs and reduces access, but ultimately employs more people and drives economic inclusion and empowerment within the sectors that I care about, which includes Nairobi, where I am right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it sounds like you have some kind of unique insights and experience that led to starting Powered by People. So what's the kind of founding story?
Yeah, I founded Powered by People with Hedvig Alexander and Allison Phillips in about 2019. And it was, each of them also have their own unique experience in building incredibly amazing independent brands. And they also came with these really broad networks of sourcing from the creative manufacturers and the artisanal sector around the world. And I would say that over many years of conversing with each other at trade shows and meeting each other in the sector, we discussed a lot of the big challenges that we as individual brands faced, and continue to want to find opportunities to work together. We witnessed, I would say, this really big shift in the retail sector as well. The rise of social commerce, the ability of really fast-paced retail changes and access to new styles was being readily available on social media and Facebook, and now being a transactional platform as well as Instagram. So that's really changed retail. I think just digital transformation. Now we're starting to see brands that 2 years ago were 70% in store and now 70% online. And then, of course, just more values-driven consumption. And I would say it was this kind of convergence of digital transformation and also the values-driven consumption that now has, we believe, led to this unique opportunity and moment to really promote, and I would say for independent brands to really thrive in this new digital retail economy. It's a $1 trillion market opportunity, and so we thought it was worth throwing our weight behind it. And ultimately, our goal at Powered by People is how do we accelerate the rise of these at least 1 million. It's a very undocumented sector globally, but this 1 million creative independent brands globally poised to really meet these new trends in kind of the digital retail economy. They're able to offer smaller batch production, exclusive product development, which is much more differentiated than what you find on Amazon, and also being able to produce in small batches for continuous release. We think these are really big distinctions. We haven't heard much yet in the retail sector, but we think it's going to be the things that will make and break brands and retailers in the future. And we really believe that actually independent retail can serve this market in a really unique way. So yeah, we currently have about 40 different countries represented in our community. We have about 200 different brands that we represent. We're adding about 10 every single week right now. So if you ask us again in another month, that'll have increased significantly. And this is, independent brands across textiles, home decor, accessories, personal care, some of the fastest growing segments in the world. And I guess in brief, we are providing kind of digital market access to a whole new class of brands and really supporting digital production management tools, as well as financing and market access to this new global community of brands.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for kind of giving us a overview of it. Kind of going back though to the earliest days of starting it. What were like the first steps that you took to start it as a B2B marketplace?
Yeah, we actually started a little bit more with building out our brand tools. We recognize that in business to business marketplaces, where's the bottleneck? And I think for global brands and global independent brands, the sector that we're working in, digitization is actually a really big challenge for them. And so access to internet, that's actually not a challenge anymore. I mean, you have a lot of mobile technology and penetration of internet is quite high. But just having business tools is a really, having a mobile phone and having access to Facebook is one thing, but having actual business tools for some of these independent brands globally is quite unique. And so we felt like a lot of business to business wholesale platforms have already proven out the retail space. And we're like, okay, we'll get to that. We already have deep networks in that space as well from our building our own brands. And so we really focused on those tools. We built out our own multi-vendor management tool, which actually serves as a free system that anyone can use. It looks and feels like sort of a Shopify. We actually are built on Shopify right now just because we've hacked things together over the last 6 months. But we ultimately allow for more of wholesale functionality within our portal and access to financing, which is a really unique offering. So we built the digital tools and the financing first, and those were very maker-facing, value-added services. And then basically once we felt like we'd had a critical mass, had an aspirational sort of high-quality, verified group of makers, we've now opened the platform. And now just 6 months ago, we launched PVP Market, and that's what we stand behind today as our core business unit.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So we've actually had the chance to speak with a few other marketplace founders that are in the B2B and kind of SaaS enabled, started by building some like the SaaS tooling first that solves specific problems and then kind of introduce the marketplace. What was like your initial kind of go-to-market strategy then, being building the kind of initial SaaS tooling and the payments and whatnot, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think those were very much independent offerings at one point. So we didn't actually launch those as together. They weren't, necessarily combined. We are actually on Friday launching the first sort of integrated solution, which includes the market, the financing, and the digital tools all now in one interface. And again, we offer that for free for anyone who's in our sector of creative manufacturing, small businesses, and anyone who's looking to and has the capacity to basically be anyone who's values driven is probably our greatest criteria. And then if you want to be featured on our market, it's just a one-click feature to actually then introduce you to our market offering, and you can apply for financing. So what's really exciting about this, and I feel like I'm not addressing your question, Mike, but I think that it allows us to not just manage on-market transactions. What we're finding is what's really interesting is that right now we might introduce them to 1%, 2%, 3% of new orders and transactions in their overall business, but they could actually run their other 97% of their business on our tools as well, which could provide them access to access to financing for off-market transactions. And I think that that's when this platform, as I would say, not just a marketplace, but a platform, becomes really interesting. But again, I always say the closer you are to the customer and the paying, the monetary strategy of these businesses and our customers, the better we are in sort of remaining sort of a sticky solution. So our market remains kind of, I would say, the biggest draw for why people join our platform. Then it's the financing, because again, if you can assist with cash flow, and then I would say the last is really digital tools, because the adoption is driven by the desire to access new markets and financing.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for sharing with us. So you did mention, being close to the customer. So I guess it might be helpful to learn a little bit more about, who is that Powered by People for on the kind of customer side, and maybe like what is the specific problems that you're solving for?
Yeah, great question. We on the buyer side, we position ourselves, Powered by People, as really the first of its kind curated digital wholesale marketplace that focuses on responsibly sourced products and goods. So it has this trusted, vetted platform for buyers, independent retailers, large scale brands as well. And I can go through our customer list, and really connecting them then with differentiated and diverse brands, but also unique exclusive products. And I think I want to emphasize that I don't think there's enough conversation around how you differentiate. And we see that our retailers are going to be most successful by differentiating with diversity and one of a kind sort of access. Of course, these are business to business wholesale scaled production. They can do tens of thousands of units in a month if they needed. But we encourage kind of small batch, small run, exclusive products. You can switch out a colorway, make it unique to you. But as far as who our retailers are, we also, one of the biggest draws, similarly to what we offer to our makers on our platform, is our business to business, or I would say our buy now, pay later financing solution. It is a really big value add. And we are generally a little bit of an elevated marketplace right now, just by how we've positioned ourselves kind of launching into the market. So we offer $3,000 a flexible cash advance, advance to the makers, but flexible payment sort of model, net 60 payment terms to our buyers as well. And that has been largely and well utilized by a number of them. And again, our average transaction compared to other platforms is closer to about $1,200 running through our platform right now. So it's a little bit higher than what you'd find across other much more kind of mainstream independent retail. That's how we work with West Elm, the Citizenry, Crate and Barrel, Pottery Barn, Cost Plus World Market, a lot of these that are focused on the sector of home goods, home decor, home accessories, personal care, gift, and largely are looking at kind of values-based businesses where they can promote story and want a bit more transparency and authenticity to the sourcing of that product. So that's been our positioning kind of to date. And I think we want to maintain kind of authenticity to that narrative as well. We think this is what customers want. And ultimately, our retailers will be more successful, we believe, by sourcing through our platform and then just being competitive on the financing and the trust and the guarantees that we can offer them.
That's really great. I know that's going to lead to some questions here. So you did mention helping as far as like highlight some of the diversity. So how are you doing that as a marketplace, and maybe helping with that kind of like discovery process for retailers that are looking for some of the makers and brands?
Yeah, it's interesting actually what we have found that retailers are actually looking for. Oftentimes there's a regional focus. They'll be wanting to do kind of a story-led capsule collection within some of the larger retailers. Smaller independent retailers oftentimes have a little bit of a thematic focus. And so if they, have lean towards kind of African aesthetic, they might want to source products from across the continent. So we do oftentimes find that regional sort of sorting is actually a really interesting one for us. But it's still all the same sorting as everyone else. It's going to be on price. It's going to still, largely be driven by, do they love the product? Do they think it can sell at that price? And is it a quality and consistency that they can rely on? And we just, the way that we look at it is, how can we curate a platform where they just, all of the ethics, the quality, the values-driven alignment, women-based businesses, sustainable supply chains, all that stuff is just a given. So you can come onto the platform and basically not have to think about it. You can source something you like and know that there's good sort of ethical foundations of good for the people, good for the planet behind your products, and you can really shop freely. And we do try to just create that environment where it feels very, we want it to remain magical. We do a lot of storytelling. We allow for a lot of brands to actually represent, the maker community that they represent. As much as we have 200 brands on the platform today, they represent a network of 140,000 individual artisans. And that is a big part of what we lean on when we speak to retailers, is allowing them to use those same assets. And actually, as a digital platform, it's one thing we focus on. We digitize a lot of these independent brands from around the world, and giving those digital assets to our retailers is actually also really significant value add to their businesses, be it storytelling, properly crafted narratives, but also imagery, be it video, which is a better medium these days, or of course, photography as well.
Yes. So, on that note, how are you reaching some of these brands that might not even have like a digital kind of presence, as you mentioned? And then what does that kind of onboarding process look like?
Yeah, right now, I would say most of the brands that we have, they have to have experience exporting. So we're not necessarily today, I think, achieving this goal of, global access for independent brands. So a lot of them are well established today. I would say 40% have a Shopify site. And so we have the ability to integrate with your Shopify, upload your SKUs through our platform. We are working on an integration on the inventory level right now, because I think that'll be a really important part for kind of omni-channel management. What we have found is a lot of brands, they're oftentimes just selling retail, and we're for the first time pushing them into wholesale. So we recognize our platform is actually the first time they are an omni-channel retailer. And that's where our tools actually come in, is if they can use our portal as the single source for integrating with all their other, mobile merchandising, e-commerce, and now wholesale. We see that as kind of the future for our platform as well. But yeah, that said, Shopify integrations is one. Otherwise, we work with a lot of programs like She Trades with the UN, a lot of local programs that will effectively do capacity development, from really export readiness to financial sort of cleanliness, business acumen. We will use those as feeder programs for what we're doing. And then we do a high curation on aesthetics. Do we think it will sell? Because ultimately we are financing all these transactions, and pushing a product into the market that's going to get returned or not sold is something that we're a bit, in the early days anyway, a little bit more cautious of. And actually we found now that with our retailers, dropship is a significant new offering, and I think new growth opportunity. And so a lot of our brands, it's a great way for them to de-risk sale of their current offering into some of the North American and European markets. So we are actually looking at that as a great way to bring on brands that maybe would have not come onto our wholesale platform, but want to start offering our dropship infrastructure and our financing infrastructure as a part of that as well. So yeah, we bring them in, we work through a number of different channels, and right now it's, we hope it pays for itself over time, but I think, again, we're just looking for kind of critical mass and to be the source of this type of product. And we're willing to obviously make the commitment in upskilling this really unique sort of maker community around the world.
Yeah, that's great. So how do you think about like category expansion, right? So like some of the brands, like what categories of, products and goods do they offer? And then, what does the future of, Powered by People potentially look like?
Yeah, great question. In brief, it's all our top selling products right now are tables. So it's anything from vases and decor all the way to flatware, to, even textiles. Then we have baskets, jewelry, and those are kind of the top 3 selling items on the site. That said, we do anything from home decor to style. We do quite a bit across apothecary, and actually that's a little bit more of a North American focus, just because of FDA sort of requirements, things like that. But that's the range that we have right now. We're looking to expand into fashion. Fashions and sizing is not something I was super excited about, but I think it's a huge opportunity, particularly in Africa. I think there are some incredible independent brands that are now emerging into the sector, and I think that it'd be foolish for us not to try to address that space. And beauty will become another big segment of ours in the very near future as well. I think there's even some room for pantry. And so if I look at like from an impact lens and having been in the space for a while, I do think that what we look at are what are sort of high value capture of Our raw materials are sourced from the local community, the cotton into the looms, where we can find coffee that's not exported as a green washed coffee, but can be roasted and packaged as a retail ready good on the continent, where we can capture the value in Africa or in Asia or in Latin America, which are our three core regions. We see those as kind of the value that we want to bring to the market. So representing local independent brands, but in kind of a global market is what we generally look to. And what we find is that consistently it's across kind of an agricultural value chain, kind of value added services sector. So it is weaving cotton, it is, sisal baskets, and then, beadwork, Peruvian wool. It's a lot of these kind of value added services and kind of high, but again, a high value good that can be exported from local economies around the world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Have you run into any maybe specific challenges around maybe ensuring like the quality of the goods, or maybe like delivery time, coming from an area that might have kind of like local nuances or factors involved?
Yeah. Because we work with export ready businesses, we actually to date we haven't seen a lot of challenges and delays. I would say if anything, a lot of people ask us about the impact of the international logistics kind of meltdown that happened. And actually, we see ourselves as a diversification a lot of times of this. A lot of our packages, again, average order size is around 1,200. It is still air freight. It is not sea freight. So it's a bit more expensive at the moment. We're working on some partnerships to bring that cost down. But it is still competitive with what you'd find in as a landed good in the US for sure, but as a sort of a global offering. And ultimately, it's getting to our customers in a time when a lot of their other stock was not arriving. Delays, of course, that's probably our biggest risk. Quality, something that we do look at. Home goods is a little less risky. I think, I came from jewelry. Jewelry was my last business. It's very seasonally driven. So again, you don't want to invest in a lot of inventory. So again, you are, doing a lot of made to order production across a lot of the segments that we currently represent. So time is definitely something that you have to kind of look at from a capacity perspective. And we try not to match, a small, really tiny independent business with a really large, West Elm. We do want to kind of make sure that there's some level of experience or like historical match between similar archetypes. So has this maker produced for a similar class of buyer before, and has the same capacity as well and sort of volume of order been produced by that maker? That gives us a pretty high confidence that they will be able to fulfill on an order, and that the buyer is, of course, willing and able to pay.
Yeah, thanks on that. I was actually just trying to, I think, articulate about some of the risks maybe that might be taking on. So yeah.
Definitely.
So how are you monetizing?
Yeah, so on the market transactions, we get a 15% commission on a successful transaction. So this month we're doing, we actually broke our 1 million GMV for the month, which is super exciting for the first time. So we'll do about 1.2 million in transactions in the month of January. We get 15% on on-market. Off-market transactions, we get around 5% because it's just financing. So if there's an existing relationship, we maybe don't get a commission on an existing buyer-vendor relationship, where we do get a commission if we're the ones originating a transaction. And we'll get up to, right now our average, because the adoption of our financing is quite high, we get 15% on commission on the market transactions, and then 5% on top of that for financing. So we're doing about a blended right now about 19.75% on market, and then a 5% off market. So our average right now is around 13% capture on our GMV.
Yeah, congrats on the milestone, by the way, for the GMV. So,
yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah,
and our tech is free, I think, to close the loop on that. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like it might be a operationally kind of intensive marketplace kind of compared to others. So what is your team like today, and kind of like the org structure?
Yeah. Well, I am CEO and co-founder of the business, and I'm based here in Kenya. So we do have a large technology team here. Our fintech team is here. Of course, M-Pesa was born out of Kenya. So I think there's a strong sort of knowledge base, I would say, of engineers that know how to build solid fintech products. And then we have, of course, like our market and brand team is based with our team in Canada. We are a Canadian company, registered company with a subsidiary in Kenya and a sub in the US. But we have kind of our brand market sales is out of the US and Canada. We have our web designers are in the US. And then we have a team on the ground in India that manages pretty much our largest market is India. And then we also have a team in Mexico City. So kind of all over the map. We grew up in COVID era, so I feel like we just sort of embraced this whole digital remote work, and ultimately that's served us to find the best talent wherever it is, and ultimately build this global footprint that I think is also builds confidence in our ability to deliver to our retailers on each of these sort of regional markets that we source from today.
Yeah, so fair to say that you're distributed. So
yeah, exactly.
So
we are hiring right now, if I can plug a little bit, that we've just closed actually 2 weeks ago our seed financing of $5 million in seed funding. So we are looking for a CTO and growth hacking engineers. And we're looking to build up a substantial team across the US. So if anyone knows anyone that's looking, also we're looking for fintech people if you guys know anyone, so let us know.
Awesome. We'll certainly add the jobs to our job space. And yeah, congrats on the funding. So I didn't want to bring it up because I wasn't sure if it was public news yet. So
I'm not going to say who it is yet, and we will have a whole PR moment. So yeah, don't blow up my spot, Mike.
All right, cool. We can edit this out if we need to. So
yeah, it's only for the people on this call. How about that?
Right. Perfect. Yeah, so we're going to jump into questions here in a little bit, because I know we have quite a few founders that specifically want to come on and ask you some questions. Before we do, so you have some really great experience, and specifically in B2B marketplaces in the earlier stage. So do you have any specific tips that might be helpful for founders that are building early stage B2B marketplaces that might be helpful?
I don't know that there's any secret sauce. I mean, I think we're still trying to figure out this, the market fit, to be frank. We chose very early on, again, where's the bottleneck? And we said, not only where the biggest challenges, but where our unique offering was on our maker side, that our community is what makes us quite differentiated. And so we focused on them. That said, that's not the monetization side of the business. And so, there's a bit of a risk in that you build a platform for makers and then it doesn't have a market fit on the buyer side. We've come from this sector. We know what brands need, and we know also what sells into the retail market. So that did help quite a bit. We leaned on a lot of existing relationships, retailers that I developed relationships with in my last business. And then we really just had a bit of an obsession and just sort of holding on. We actually created, maybe the advice would be to create a founder buyer circle. So we did that pretty early on, where we engaged a group of 5-10 retailers that we were feeling like were kind of our ideal profile, and really held them close, guided them through the process, asked for their feedback, gave them lots of free gifts, buy and shop, tell us how your experience is. It was also really important for us to kind of have that flywheel of exposure and interest from the retailers that we were focused on. And then I think, just staying true to, not get too distracted by the competition. I think there's a lot of noise in this space right now, and it's a really exciting space to be in. But I think, frankly, it's just a solid market and solid business opportunity that was just never really exploited before, because people could just physically go to trade shows and other things. And I think we're in kind of a hot market that we need to focus on our differentiation. And I think that is ultimately what's going to win us in the long tail. That's yet to be proven out. But I think early stage, it's about just being completely committed to your buyers and having those very close relationships. Yeah.
That's great. I think that's a good segue right into a question that Nishant actually wanted to ask. Hey, do you want to come on?
Hi, Ella. First of all, congratulations on your funding. That's an amazing business that you're building. I have a question on demand generation, specifically when it comes to like B2B and cross-border. One of the things I struggle with is how much of it is online versus offline demand generation, because running a marketing campaign in like international markets is quite expensive for early stage startups. Any advice on that? Like, is there like a good ratio on, relationships or offline sales versus online?
Yeah. I think that's a phenomenal question. I think it's fair to say that actually most of our sales still are offline. So I would say the largest transactions are what we call concierge. So where someone might find our marketplace, but they're still, we don't have quite enough offerings. So they're asking, can I get this other slightly different thing or slightly, and of course you don't want to do that long term, but when you're still young and trying to discover, frankly, that market fit, I think it is important to kind of chase some of these tails, as long as you know that you don't pivot your whole business around one buyer feedback. So we do a lot of hand-holding, we do a lot of concierge service. And that ultimately has led us to develop our business model in a substantial way into these more core sort of repeatable business models and opportunities. That said, I mean, we are starting to see, I would say over the last 2 months, a lot more digital transaction pickup. We're having pretty significant online traction now. Digital is working for us. And again, I would go back to purpose and differentiation, like Net 60, trusted platform, all those things. That's what everyone else does. It's a little bit of a me too, but if you can really say specifically what you do and go after that customer, that has worked really well for us. So, sustainably sourced, handmade, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, like these are the things that our retailers are looking for, and finding the right customer and the right retailer. Our return on ad spend right now is 7. We have had a really phenomenal transition from our ads into actually signups on the site. So I'd say it's actually performed very well for us. And as business to business, you have a little bit more of a budget to acquire someone because the lifetime value of that customer is. So you can actually, I actually think we have the benefit of being in business to business, because direct to consumers oftentimes fighting on the same channels for the same AdWords.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we also try to leverage our network as best we can and say cross marketing, cross promotion, brands, hey, you guys, like, think of us as your business to business solution. How can we work harder for you? And how can you be, again, part of this community? Having a bit more of a purpose, people feel more drawn in and bought into the community. It is an aspirational community. They feel that they are part of, a value-driven sort of objective. And so I think they're a little bit more inclined to also promote us through their own channels as well. And of course, the more kind of cross promotion you get, the better the traction is overall. But yeah, I think it's important to note that even though you're a digital platform, I still think having personal relationships, calling buyers, when someone buys, I call them up on the phone still. I try to have a personal relationship with many of them as I can in this early stage, for sure.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you. Thanks, Ella.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thanks. Hey, Donna, do you want to come on?
Sure. Hi, my name's Donna Sakita. I run a B2B textile marketplace. So I work with suppliers that have leftover textiles and match them with designers and small companies that need the textiles. So you talked about the benefits of a B2B marketplace, but I'm curious about, what do you think are the challenges of a B2B marketplace and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, as a brand, I would say my hesitation when I was my own business was I wanted to control. So my business, SoCo, which still exists today, joined Fair actually back in the early days of Fair and has since left. And I think I wasn't a part of that because I'd already left to be part of Powered by People. So that's the current CEO. And I think it points out something that's a big challenge for business to business marketplaces, which is you never want to become the yellow pages of a solution. You don't want to be the one-time connection and then they work around you, because, so there's definitely like a friction point where you want to drive enough value to both sides of the market. They want to stay in your system. And you want to have enough repeatability of business, but if the business is too repeatable and they have to run everything through you, then would they rather just replace you and move around you? So I think that there's definitely sort of a repeatability, but also a freshness that needs to be constantly maintained on business to business. The other side, the other point I was trying to make though, is I think with Fair, and I think with any business to business wholesale site, is that brands want to maintain their own brand messaging and their own storytelling. And I think that, they build brand value. And so if they're placed next to something, which is what happened in my brand's case, we were all handmade jewelry from Kenya and we're being placed next to mass produced stuff from China. Price points are a little bit different, and you can't communicate in a picture and a price point why the value is higher. And that's where brand value really comes from, is being able to articulate that through your brand messaging. And so I think that is a big challenge, I think, for business to business wholesale marketplaces in general, is like, how do we allow autonomy, but not let people work around us, and be a platform that's in service to their business as best we can by other value-added services. I think aggregation, so we do the financing as an aggregation. It's access to markets is just one part of it, right? So if there is that buyer connection, they don't work around us because they still want the financing, or they want to reduce logistics costs, or they want some other sort of community benefit, like resource benefit. But I think that finding that value is not always easy, especially if you're more of a commodity. I think it sounds like you have kind of a unique market as well, but I would say also there's the tendency to slip into services. I'm not for that. It's very difficult to scale. I tried that actually in my last business, where you don't sell product from a catalog, but you start selling services. That's when you go into 100% concierge. And I think it is very difficult to frankly get your money out of the system. And so I think it's, we do have to kind of look for these places where you can make money without, while sleeping, without having to manage it. And I think, finding those sort of scalable moments is obviously what makes or breaks a business to business wholesale marketplace, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Is that consistent with what you're seeing? I feel like those are common problems, but.
Yeah, I was just trying to look for some, insight that I haven't run into yet. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Maybe nothing original there, but thanks for the question.
That's really helpful. Hey, Donna, I know you had a few other questions. So if you wanted to ask those in a second, feel free to ask those.
Well, actually, she's answered a lot of them. I don't know if that was, through you or just the other conversations. So I think someone else might want to go.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually had a question for you myself, which was, you did mention that you have these, additional kind of value-add services such as like financing, and buy now, pay later. So this is something that comes up quite often in the community, and the founders are thinking through like some of the like nuanced decision-making factors, and just really trying to learn learn from other founders of like how they thought about potentially venturing into those services. And was that something that you partnered with a provider on, or did you try to build that internally, or just maybe learning a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we wanted to sort of meet the market where it was, and admittedly, this is a bit of the standard across, when you look at a lot of other business to business wholesale marketplaces, they're all offering net 60 payment terms. And so if you want to be competitive in this space to a buyer, that's their expectation now. And I think for good reason. I actually come from a retail family. My mom had her own gallery and her own storefront as well. And I actually feel like, having cash flow management is super critical. One, you just get more value onto the shelves. You can drive higher volume of orders. Like, it just makes sense in a way. We went a step further in extending cash advances to our producer community. So what we do is sort of this 60 days advance for production of an order, and then 60 days of net to the buyer. And so we look at 120-day financing with a fixed fee. We actually allow buyers as an option to even take up that fee, and some of them do, like the Citizenry in West Elm. But for a mainstream independent retailer, they might not want to pay the 5% that goes towards that financing. But it has, I think, for us, it's been a really critical piece of just, again, standardizing in a way the buyer experience, and then focusing on differentiation, distinction, diversity, and quality on the vendor and kind of the unique sort of maker community that we have. So yeah, we started off with that. I mean, it was a no-brainer. When my business partners and I talked back in the day, we actually started our own financing. It was 3 pillars. It was like access to markets, access to financing, and access to sort of digitization tools. And so it was always a part of our business from back in 2019, before, I would say, a lot of these business to business wholesale marketplaces offered that. But when we launched Market, it made sense to incorporate that into the transaction in a much more seamless way. I think it's again, just sort of maintaining kind of a standardization in the sector of that experience, but then continuing to focus and lean in and invest in what makes us quite unique.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it's somewhat kind of table stakes right now for B2B marketplaces.
So, yeah, it has been.
Yeah. Hey, Is it Hal? Did you want to?
Hi, thanks so much
Hi.
for this great session. So I'm building a B2B cross-border marketplace for building materials. And a lot of the orders need customization too. And a lot of times there needs to be a lot of communication between the buyer and seller, and they need to like transfer files to make drawings and stuff. So what is your advice to avoid disintermediation when the communication is needed between the buyer and seller?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, allowing direct access is always a bit of a risk, but if that documentation and contracting is ultimately done in your platform, I think that there's a value to both, right? That there's a bit of a guarantee or an escrow that you effectively serve in a transaction. In a way, that's why financing is kind of critical in our model, because we act as sort of an intermediary in the transaction. We collect the payment from the buyer and we issue out. We effectively have kind of inserted or embedded ourselves in the transaction. And so just making sure that there is a way for you to keep a hook on them, to get certain rates, to get, you know, sort of a guarantee on both sides, because that trust is important when you're working with remote sort of buying and selling relationships. I think it is actually more important than probably in a local and domestic relationship. That said, I mean, I lean back on my design experience. Like, I think back in my design degree, if you can parameterize and really build parametrics around your transaction as best you possibly can, you know, I tried it actually in my last business. We built jewelry and we wanted to build basically manufacturing as a service to other brands. We had a relationship with Nordstrom's, who even wanted to do their own white label brand with us. And ultimately, we went away from it for many different reasons. But I mean, the success rate when you're going from an idea to an executed product is much lower than when you're going from something that is a staple, well-known, established product. So if you can even create a modular kitchen, or I don't know exactly what your product is, but like, you know, a square footage modular component to what you're doing. I also come from architecture, so I have a little idea of modular home building or whatever.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if you can sort of containerize it in a sense, kit of parts, and allow for some level of parameter, at least there's a known variable that you're starting those negotiations from. So the rate of success is that much higher. So I tried this in my last business. Like we would sample 200, and again, it was jewelry. So the rate of change was much higher than in architecture. It's actually why I left architecture. I like having a little bit more of iteration. But I feel like, you know, you had 200 products and maybe 20 of them went into production. And then even then, you know, the scale in which because you don't know pricing, you don't know that the product to sort of project fit is necessarily going to work in that way. Like there's just so much that it's left to question, that I think the closer you can sort of bring up the process to meet the buyer where they want to be, I feel like your rate of success is higher. And also it adds value to your platform if you can help to kind of facilitate a little bit more of these like ready-made transactional sort of facilitated sort of transactions. I don't know that this is relevant to your business. I feel like I should ask more questions, but yeah, I feel like that's how I would look at it.
Yeah, so we're super early. I'm still doing a lot of this offline, and I would set up the meetings between both parties, and I will sit in the meeting as well, trying to understand like what they need in order to make an order. So yeah, I think building that communication tool within the platform would be helpful. And then I also have sellers who tells me that I can sign up the credit term as the buyer. So I wanna ask you, like in the super early stages, how do you create this payment terms for the buyers when you are like still super young, without many relationships?
Yeah, I mean, we offered, so we basically did off balance sheet for a while. I mean, when we first raised our additional capital, no one would take a risk on what we were proposing. Once we broke about $1 million in transaction value to date, in just rather the last 6 months, we've transacted about 5 million plus in order value financing. So it's scaled up really quickly. And to a 0% default at this point. And so I think that it's been a very successful, again, we look at it from a little bit of a different perspective than just, it's not loans, right? It is really about allowing for more cash flow in a transaction. A buyer's coming because they want to buy a product, and the makers and the seller wants to have a successful transaction because that's how they get their final payment and they make their profitability. And so I think just having the ability for a little bit of an alternative view, we actually judge our producer organizations on their ability to produce and the buyer's ability to pay. So we do all the credit scoring on that side. But yeah, I think if you can basically kind of lubricate this chain a little bit, where you can allow for less friction and have more transactions and higher volume transactions running through, I think absolutely try to do that, even if it is small to start, and kind of build it up over time. It's amazing how quickly that became actually one of our greatest drivers of revenue even today, even though it seems small. It's a really big part of our business.
Last question. So is there any like legal things we need to do in order to be the escrow service provider?
I mean, I wouldn't be a quote unquote escrow, just like I actually, to the world, we are not a finance company, we are a merchant. And so actually what we look for is actually merchant on record. And that's something you might look for as well, where you basically we have a separate transaction with our buyer than we have with our vendor. So the financing, irregardless of what the buyer's choice is on financing, if we allow for a flexible, it's actually our standard terms, a flexible payment to the buyer that's independent of if we provide advances to our makers. And again, because we're a marketplace, it's built into a transaction in a purpose-driven order. So again, we're a merchant. We're not a finance organization. We're just moving money on terms that are consistent with how a marketplace or a merchant would move money, which allows us a certain level of flexibility on that 60 terms, and on the other side, on the producer side, the ability for advances. So it is, we don't do interest, we have a fee. There's different terms for the same stuff, but it allows you don't have to be like regulated by a banking institution. And there are thresholds too, like when you're doing over 2 million, then maybe you will want an opinion that says, okay, we are not a financial institution. This is how we run our transaction through. But again, in certain markets like India, we actually have to be the merchant on record because we're passing the money. We actually have to be the buyer as well. So the buyer on record that then within a flash title or within the same second that we buy it, we're selling it. So we don't ever take that inventory risk, but we are effectively the one that's transacting that purchase. Yeah.
Awesome. That's really helpful. We actually had our community payments expert in residency come on at that right time with Ryan here. So
hi, Ryan.
Ella, you are speaking my language. So
did I get it right?
I mean, this was like singing to my heart. Do you know how many people I have to correct when they say, I need MTLs, I need MSBs, I'm like, no, you do not. It's no different than a B2B company going out and sourcing goods from a supplier to make, like McDonald's, they don't need money transfer license to pay the people that package their French fries and send it to them, right?
Right.
It's a supplier. And as long as you fall within those guardrails that the legislator and regulators have set up, you don't need to do that. And I think that so many people think that they need that because companies like Amazon and others have gone down that path. They've only gone down that path because they want to make money on interest, and they want to make money on dynamic discounting and factoring and things like that. That changes the game, right? But you've got it right. You're more or less paying a vendor, and in some countries, you're right. You have to take flash inventory. So sorry, it's your show. I don't want to take it, but go ahead.
No, that's good.
I know. I just want to say hey, so that way everyone does see here and come on. So I did want to get to Cynthia because I know you've definitely been looking forward to this. So do you want to come on, Cynthia?
Hi, Ellen. Thank you so much for this. And I think we sort of have like the same path. You had a brand before you started Powered by People. It was the same thing as I am. I'm a textile designer. We used to make batik. hand-dyed textile fabrics, empower women in rural communities to create these products. Yeah, and I used to bootstrap that business. The name of the brand is the Adire Lounge, and over time, what we were able to do is we tried to sell on fair wholesale, and it was not possible. They do not take African brands, which was why I decided to start my marketplace, Craftomers. We've not launched yet. We almost do the same thing as Powered by People, but Powered by People is far way above it. The idea is we want to connect African brands to retail stores, small independent shops. So we are not looking at like large box stores. We just want retail stores who have like 1 to 10 independent shops and be able to access these brands. So these us brands can access international markets and also help them to sell their products. And the problem we've been having is you've answered most of my questions. I just wanted to say that I really love the idea. I love all the questions you've answered. Most of my colleagues in the community have asked questions I wanted to ask concerning go-to-market strategy, how the buy now, pay later works. For now, we can't do that in-house. We just got like a first check from an investor. So we're looking at partnering with, thank you. We're looking at partnering with B2B pay, companies, other payments platforms who would help us do that process for the system terms, payments, and all that. So my question is that over time, as a new brand coming without so much network from the retailer side, how would you advise that we handle that?
Repeat the question again. I missed the first part of it. How we reach the retailer community?
Yes, the retailers. If you don't have so much network, like a lot of network, how would you reach out to retailers?
This is the question of the century. I feel like everyone would love to answer this. Again, we started the business because I had my own brand. My business partners also had their own brand. So we had a network and a Rolodex of about 3,500 retailers, from museum shops to, the West Elms of the world. One thing we did, though, that I think actually was probably one of the best that we did to open up new markets was that we actually did a survey. So we wanted to kind of understand what retailers were really looking for in sourcing differently or within the space of kind of social good. And we just asked them for their time, and they were really generous with their time. So we talked to anyone from like supply chain teams to merchandising, and sometimes we'd get a buyer. The buyers are quite busy. But if for some of the bigger companies, that was actually a really great way for us to sort of get a foot in the door, show that we really cared about kind of solving their problems, and allowed us to sort of build more of a rapport rather than just transactional sale. And I would say that is consistent with how we try to maintain our relationships today, is that we really want them to be successful. If they are successful in selling our product, they will make us successful. On the other side, we've had a phenomenal growth marketing team in-house. And we have gone pretty aggressive on this sector. I would say we are not tiptoeing into the space. I think that there's already a lot of momentum and proof in this business model. And ultimately, we believe it's time for independent brands around the world to have access to this market opportunity within this business model. So we are investing quite heavily in digital ads, paid marketing. We went to trade shows. Again, we try to be a feature booth rather than like blend in as a vendor. We wanted to be more of like a technology sponsor for the event rather than kind of just a traditional sort of sales outlet. And that worked actually pretty well in just sort of establishing ourselves in the market. And then we look at industry journals. There's a lot of publications that I think are important. But again, aggregation is still key. I mean, the way I like to look at it is I was one brand and we would spend, $10,000 a month on ads as a single brand. We are now 200 brands and we are their sales and marketing representation into the market. We need to be spending at 200 times that capacity to really make a dent in the independent retail space. And again, I think the more specific your message, the better always with regard to digital marketing, and then just having a lot of consistency. So if you have the ability to invest in marketing, I think it does pay for itself. It just takes a while. I'd say it always takes like 3 years to get like brand recognition. And we're only 6 months in, so can't say that we've also completely cracked that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, Ella. Shay Holder. Thank you very much. This was very enlightening and definitely beneficial to me. I guess one question, yeah, financing was one that I was very engaged on. Obviously, I think I'm looking at doing Airbnb of office experience, so larger checks, so financing is critical. And I know you sort of bootstrapped and then built it. I've tried to avoid the issue, but it sounds like I need to tackle it. So I'm going to probably reach out to Ryan to get some more guidance there. I guess one question you didn't directly, but maybe it's not an issue for you, dispute resolution. You talked about building trust and obviously your financing. And so I assume most transactions go well, but things happen, even if it's not the intent. So just want to know how you've, at least in concept, considered how to deal with that. So
yeah, I mean, to purchase insurance to cover our transactions is 1% basically of your transaction volume would have to go back into insurance. As long as our default rate is less than 1%, I think we're still in the realm of bootstrapping and not jumping into sort of a regulated sort of purchased production. That said, I mean, I would say distribution and risk distribution across our buyers and our financing is probably the most critical for us at this stage to kind of avoid that. We know that there's going to be bad deals. I try not to even think about it, to be honest. I write it off. I put that on someone else, of course, but like I try to say that if you don't have a growth mentality, then, you know, and you want to get hung up on the 1% that's going badly and you're not focusing on the growth opportunity of the 99%, as long as that 1% is not going to sink you. So again, you know, distribution of your client base, sometimes it's not worth your energy, right? Because it's opportunity costs. So I guess it's a little bit more of just a mentality thing for me. And I don't know the size of your transaction, so it might be worth it. But what we do is we focus a lot more on fraud prevention. So we have credit safe, played checks. We do Trulio KYC compliance. We actually do a lot more on just making sure that the people we're transacting with are real people and not intentionally trying to do ill harm. Once you've done that, you've kind of cut out 90% of your risk. Then it's just the random delay or the broken order, you know, or the something you maybe need to follow up with your courier or call someone on the phone and ask for a payment plan or ask for, you know, sort of delayed disbursements of goods, things like that. So then you might have a contract negotiation. I think whenever possible, we definitely try to negotiate if we know that there's going to be some sort of default process or an at risk. And we have some, I said earlier, we have 0% default. We always have a little bit at risk because it's maybe like delayed. But it's less than, for us, it's less than, I think it's 0.4% of our portfolio. So it's not very much. And so to be frank, we haven't actually focused too much on the collection side, and it's more focused on the fraud side of the business. Don't let them in the first place. I hope that helps. Again,
thank you very much. That was very helpful.
More about your business. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Thank you. That was. It wouldn't be a chat about marketplaces without bringing up risk, fraud, and we covered disintermediation earlier. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're almost out of time here, but thanks again for taking time to join us. This is a really great chat, and congrats on all the recent progress and growth. So before we wrap things up, though, what's exciting ahead for the future Powered by People? Maybe in the next 1 to 3 years.
Honestly, I'm really excited about this tool we're launching on Friday, and of course, I'm like focused on the new shiny toy. But I think that it's going to be the thing that allows us to get a little bit more of the viral growth and relevance in the sector to be really identified as the go-to source for purpose-driven brands around the world. Like that is, we still have to kind of get our footing in the market in that way. And I feel like we're about to do that with this much more self-onboarded, open platform. And then again, we'll focus less on letting people on the platform from the maker side and a little bit more on the policing. Maybe we'll do a little bit more verification towards the back end of their onboarding. But I think we'll be able to open it up to the 3,000 brands that we have in our CRM system. And right now we've only allowed on 0.5% of them to date. So I think opening that up and allowing, for a little bit more of like a lower price point, a little more diversity in product, I think is going to be a really exciting pivot for the business. But of course, maintaining true to our values and ensuring that we don't lose our mission and our vision of participation, but also quality and trust that we have with our buyers.
Yeah, that's great. We'll have to keep an eye out for that Friday, and we'll of course kind of share it on our social to help kind of build up some more awareness around that. On that note too, though, right before we just wrap things up there for good, where can we keep up with you? Just time for a quick little plug.
Yeah, you can always write me directly at ella@poweredbypeople.com. I'm really excited to engage you guys as a community. My LinkedIn is open, LinkedIn to me. Otherwise, yeah, just follow us on social. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. That's not me personally, but yeah, we do spend time on this platform. So yeah, find Powered by People online.
Awesome. I'll include links in the details.
Yeah, please. I'll send you all those.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. This is a really fun chat. So, and it was, definitely great to learn more about what you're building. And, once again, congrats to and all the great progress. So.
Yeah, thank you guys. This is really fun. I'm glad to get to know everyone, and I look forward to following up with a number of you. So.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for the great questions too, and joining in today.